So we've got a couple of people with us from the National Trust tonight, Cathy and Abby, that are going to be talking about the vegetation clearance work. So if you've got any questions along the way, then please put them in the chat box. And as I say, we'll pick those up at the end, and say there'll be an opportunity for a bit of Q&A at the end to ask them any questions. Well, I'll just start by introducing myself and the project. So my name is Marianne Pye, and I manage the Carneddau Landscape Partnership scheme. And I'm joined here by Cathy Laws and Abby Edwards from the National Trust. And we form part of the Carneddau project, which is a 5-year scheme running to 2025, that really aims to help promote a positive future for the Carneddau landscape by helping people, local communities to enjoy and understand and celebrate the history, cultural traditions and wildlife and all the things that make the Carneddau so special. So we'll be helping to protect the area's special features by doing things like promoting sustainable land use to help look after rare habitats and species and archaeological features, and also things like recording place names and memories and traditions. So there's lots and lots going on in the project. And it's also funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. So we've got a 1.7 million grant from them to do all this work. So Carneddau is quite a vast area in terms of the area that we're covering. So it's not just the mountains that we're all familiar with, it's as well as the uplands, it's the lowland areas and the communities that surround them. So all the way from the Ogwen Valley across to the Conwy Valley, and all the way from the coastal north to the sort of Capel sort of Betws side at the south. So it's quite a varied landscape full of all sorts of special features. There's a huge partnership of organisations that have come together to do this work. So Snowdonia National Park is leading on the project with support from partners like National Trust and Snowdonia Society, Cadw, Natural Resources Wales, and a whole bunch of others. To really kind of try and achieve this this vision of helping to look after the heritage of the Carneddau. So Cathy and Abby are going to be talking about one of the many projects that we're going to be delivering, and it involves quite a key part of the scheme, which is to try and involve volunteers, so people in kind of helping to look after what's on their doorstep. So really tonight is about just raising awareness of the work that we're going to be doing, and hopefully giving you an opportunity to find out about how you can get involved in the project. So without further ado, I'll pass over to you, Cathy.
Thank you, Marianne. I'm going to see if I can get my slides up for you. Can somebody confirm that you can see the slides successfully?
Yeah, we can see that.
Lovely, thank you very much. Okay, well, hello everybody, and thank you very much for joining tonight. It's great to have you all along, and I hope you'll join in with some sort of discussion after the presentation. So my name's Cathy Laws, and I'm an archaeologist working for the National Trust, which is one of the partners in this fantastic cooperative venture. Abby, whose name is also on this slide, is a National Trust ranger, and Abby's better placed than me to answer questions on the wildlife side of things. And Abby will be presenting the Welsh language version of this Caffi tomorrow. just thought I'd just start with this sort of slightly complicated slide, but it just gives you an idea of the all the different project strands that make up the Carneddau Landscape Partnership. So the 9 larger bubbles are the project strands, and then the smaller bubbles around them are the projects within those project spans. So the one we're going to talk about tonight, which is 2A, the the vegetation clearance project, is up there highlighted in yellow at the top. So the vegetation clearance project sits within the Grays Uplands project strand. The upland pastures of the Carneddau provide a vital feeding habitat for the red-billed chough, one of the rarest members of the crow family found in the UK. They also preserve evidence for early land clearance and farming in the form of ancient fields and settlements, which survive as archaeological sites and features in the landscape. So the project connects both the conservation needs of the chough and the archaeological sites, both of which are being affected by increased vegetation cover. So it's a multi-faceted project. It's a double whammy, if you get my meaning. Keep having to move this little box with Marion in it to be able to move on. There we go. So what are the issues for heritage? So we have a wide range of archaeological sites across the Carneddau. 97 sites are designated by CADU as scheduled monuments. So if a site is scheduled, it means that there is Welsh government legislation in place to govern its protection and management. All 97 of the scheduled sites were visited and their condition assessed during the development phase of the project. While a wide range of threat types were identified during this condition assessment, you can see those listed down the left-hand side of this chart. By far, the highest percentage of monuments are affected by vegetation encroachment. And if you look at the bottom bar of this chart, we also considered the sort of threat level, by sort of doing a little calculation on site, looking at, what percentage of the site was covered in vegetation. We classed them as whether it was low, medium or high. And over half of those 97 monuments were either medium or high threat level for vegetation encroachment. So we'd identified this as a very particular issue relating to our monuments. The vegetation type affecting the monuments was also noted during the condition assessment visits, and this showed that gorse and bracken caused the greatest concern, with some sites being affected by both. So 38% are affected by gorse, 18% by bracken, and 13% by both. But the scheduled monument is just a snapshot of the wider picture, with many other archaeological sites in the landscape affected by vegetation encroachment. So why are bracken and gorse such an issue for archaeological sites? So both obscure the archaeology, making it difficult to understand and interpret. Bracken has an extremely extensively branched rhizome system extending between 10 and 45 centimetres into the ground, deeper in some circumstances. You can see the sort of effects on the slide on the right there. So the rhizomes sort of form a mat which inundates the soil and pushes its way between the stones. So the archaeological deposits associated with our sites, so the build-up of material associated with human use of these sites, our information bank, if you like, can occur just below the topsoil and would be adversely affected by this rhizome growth. Gorse grows in such a way that dark, bare patches of earth are created underneath, And as it matures, these are ideal spots for animal burrowing activity, which is not good for, again, for these, you know, delicate layers of archaeological information. So why are gorse and bracken such an issue for chough and habitats? The red-billed chough is a specialist feeder of soil invertebrates, such as the chafer beetle, ants, and the larva of crane flies. Historically, the short-grazed upland pastures of the Carneddau, which support these soil invertebrates, were ideal winter and autumn foraging grounds. The increase in vegetation cover linked with changes in farming practices reduces available foraging grounds. Recent studies have shown that the numbers of chough have been declining. Additionally, these large areas of invasive vegetation encroachment are not ideal. We would prefer to see a much more diverse mosaic of habitats across the Carneddau uplands. So there are two main conservation aims for this project. For heritage, the aim is to uncover and protect archaeological monuments. For wildlife, the aim is to create foraging habitats for a rare bird, the red-billed chough. And in addition to this, for people, we aim to engage local people in practical conservation work. But we can't do everything. We need to prioritise. This map overlays various pieces of information. The location of scheduled monuments in red, non-scheduled monuments in the form of upland fields and settlements in green, and chough sightings in pale blue. This information allowed us to identify 8 priority vegetation areas shown on the next slide. So these are the 8 priority vegetation clearance areas spread across the project area, and this line, incidentally, is the whole project boundary. So you can see it is a substantial area of land. So these areas, it's where it's felt that we can achieve the most for both the condition of the archaeological sites and the improvement of the chough foraging areas. So there are a number of methods for removing gorse and bracken. For large-scale removal, cutting is the most common method, with various types of machinery employed. So this is a Rytec cutter on the left, which has a series of downward-facing blades, effective particularly on the woody stems of gorse. It just sort of chomps through them. But a flail which has a circular action is also used. For bracken, a bruiser is sometimes used. If bracken is bruised rather than cut, it has the effect of drawing sap up from the rhizome and effect the bruised stems bleed, thus weakening the rhizome system. For the greatest effectiveness, however, this needs to be carried out in June or July, when maximum withdrawal of energy is taking place from the rhizome. The SSSI status of much of the area where we will be cutting means that we have to avoid the bird nesting and rearing season between the 1st of March and the 31st of August for vegetation clearance. So cutting or bruising outside of these times will be the approach. Repeated cutting or bruising will be required over a number of years to reduce the growth permanently. The cut materials also have to be dealt with, either removed and used for animal bedding or burnt on site. Burning has to be done in an extremely controlled manner. It's important that the soil is not scorched, both to safeguard the soil invertebrates, the food source for the chough, and to safeguard sensitive archaeological deposits. Burning can alter the physical properties of soil and increase the chances of erosion. We also don't want to set the whole of the Carneddau uplands on fire. So the burning needs to be carried out in some form of burning cage raised above the ground surface, and measures must be put in place to control any escaping sparks. Chemical treatments, spraying with glyphosates, are also an option, but are only likely to be used for particularly dense areas of bracken or for after treatment where the chemicals can be very selectively applied. I'll put more about this in a minute. These are fairly heavy-duty methods. These fairly heavy-duty methods will be carried out by contractors. We'll need to exclude areas where the mechanical methods have the potential to cause damage. Most of the archaeological sites include stony, upstanding features which could be significantly damaged if struck by machinery. And indeed, the machinery can also be damaged. So in areas where we are planning mechanical cutting, we will go out and mark out the archaeological features in advance to be avoided and take a different hand cut approach with these. A number of discrete and scheduled archaeological sites will also be cut by hand. To help us locate the lost archaeology in these cutting areas, we can look to another project strand. If you remember back to the bubble diagram at the beginning. So we've got a project called the LiDAR mapping project. High resolution LiDAR data has been captured for the whole of the project area. LiDAR, which means light detecting and ranging, is a method of remote sensing that obtains three-dimensional data points by using a laser mounted on an aircraft. When captured at high resolution, points captured at 25 centimetre intervals, for instance, it is able to pick up a certain amount of detail even under vegetation. We can create a mapping layer from these plots to overlay onto our ground map to help us locate and avoid the features seen on the plots. So just to look at the slides, so this is an aerial photograph and we have the LiDAR plot of the same area. It's a slightly different orientation, but these three circles equate to the three on the aerial photograph. Just to help you get your eye in, if you see this stone wall, you can see on the aerial photograph, this is running down here on the LiDAR plot. And I hope you can see, although you can see some of these features in the aerial photograph, there's quite a lot of additional information that you can see on the LiDAR plots. What we're actually looking at here is a series of, these are what you would refer to as enclosed farmsteads. So there's little hut circles within a small enclosure, and then you've got radiating fields out and about them. And these are likely to be prehistoric in date. There's one feature on the aerial photograph, you can see a square feature. That's more likely to be medieval or post-medieval. So we've sort of got a multi-period landscape here. And one of the things about being able to clear all this vegetation from, this is one of our priority areas, in fact, will be to help us understand this more fully. So during the development phase, we had the opportunity to trial hand cutting on an archaeological site. Before undertaking the work, the method was discussed and agreed with CADU, and SSSI consent was granted. The work was carried out in September after the end of the bird nesting season. The method is quite straightforward. This site had fairly dense clumps of gorse all over it. The gorse stems were cut as close to the ground as possible using long-handled loppers or a saw for bigger stems. The cuttings were loaded into large bags, which were then dragged to the area we had selected for burning. So we'd selected an area off the site. It's an offence to burn material on a scheduled monument. So it's just fortunate there is somewhere quite close to this site that we could remove the material to where it was safe to burn. And you can see here the burning cage that we used for the controlled burning of the cut materials. And we have somebody sort of loading and watching the burner all the time with containers of water on hand to put it out if need be. The ashtray under the burner proved to be rather good for baking potatoes, and I understand that Abby has also been experimenting recently with roasting marshmallows on it, toasting marshmallows on it. So a bit of fun had by all after they've or during their working day. So
was that is that just above Rachib, Cathy?
Yes, it is. It is.
Oh, okay.
It is just above Rachib. The work is time consuming, and we are unlikely to be able to repeat the work through the lifetime of the project. The plan, therefore, having removed the gorse, is to carry out a chemical after treatment. This is done either by stem injecting or spot spraying onto new growth with a herbicide. A separate SSI consent application will be required for this, and care needs to be taken to avoid spraying other species which may be emerging because the gorse has been reduced. And on this slide here, you can actually see this is actually this site after most of the gorse has been reduced, and it is in fact one of these enclosed little hilltop farmsteads. We're not quite sure exactly what you are. Inside there are a number of hut platforms with a sort of an enclosing bank around the outside. And here a close-up picture of sort of a more diverse species coming up in between the gorse, but the gorse is already growing back, so we've got to do some follow-up treatment to make sure it just doesn't end up, in a similar state in a couple of years' time. So yes, so this is our trial site. Yeah, okay. And we will. I'm not quite sure because Abby's just been back to this one and done a little bit more, but we may be returning to this one again just to finish it off. So this is where you might come in. So there is an opportunity to join the team this autumn and going forward to clear the vegetation from some of the scheduled monuments. So the sessions give volunteers the opportunity to learn about and practice vegetation clearance, with the option of signing up for an accredited unit if they wish, and also to learn about the wildlife and heritage of the area, but most importantly to work as a team and to have some fun. So you can see here that I think they're all eating baked potatoes there, and this is where they were having a little bit of training on the other archaeology in the area around the site. That was with a previous national park archaeologist. So there'll be a number of hand clearance sessions run, hopefully starting in the autumn. We start with priority area 1, which is Moel Vaban and the Rachib area. Groups of 6 to 8 people per session. We provide all the tools. It's a relatively short day, 10 a.m. till 3 p.m. And as I said before, this accredited unit is available if you want. Okay, so that's sort of a fairly brief outline of what we're going to do. I hope that you've got some questions or on the project generally, or about this particular strand, the vegetation clearance. And I hope this might have enthused you to get involved.
Thank you, Cathy. That was really interesting. I can see some people are typing, so while we're waiting for questions to come through. So you mentioned at the end there's the kind of opportunities for people to get involved volunteering. Are there also other opportunities for things like recording some of the archaeological sort of features in and around the Carneddau you can talk about?
Yes, as part of that LiDAR citizen science project, which is linked to the LiDAR, you'll see there's a little project called Surveying Archaeological Landscapes. And so, as you know, when we've studied the LiDAR and we've removed some gorse, there will be little projects running to go out and revisit sites, replan them, make sure we understand the full extent of them, and get much more information about them now that we can see them more clearly. We obviously have records about quite a lot of the sites already, but there are some that we don't have much information on because they haven't been seen or they haven't been recognised. And there's something about as well sort of joining things up. So we might have seen sites in isolation, but then there might be a wall running off in under the vegetation, and that might be going to another site or linking things up. So there's more about surveying the whole landscape and building up the time depth of the landscape, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll learn so much from gathering all that information. And I mean the LiDAR as well, is there potentially opportunities for training with that?
Yeah, the LiDAR is called a citizen science project, and so there's an opportunity to join. There'll be sessions set up where people will be trained to look at the LiDAR. So this is something that you'd be able to do from your armchair, as it were. So to look at the LiDAR and map it. There's a way of sort of effectively tracing over the LiDAR plot so that we can draw up a map on, draw the features that you can see on the LiDAR plots onto a modern maps. This then, apart from giving us the layout, this then allows us to go out onto the site and locate them. This is where, this is the business about going and marking them up in advance of the vegetation clearance so that we don't damage them. But also, knowing where to go to survey them in the future. You have to do something called ground truthing with LiDAR, because some of the features might be natural features that are sort of fooling you a little bit. Although from the plots that I have seen already, it's pretty obvious that there's an awful lot of archaeological features on those plots.
Yeah, it's amazing how much it can pick out, can't it? And when you stood on the ground, you wouldn't even know it's there, or might not necessarily realize that it's part of a historic feature. It just looks like a pile of rocks mixed in with a bunch of gorse. But and the aerial imagery can kind of what you showed there was really quite a good example, wasn't it? But yeah, it really really is astounding, really, how much detail you get from the LiDAR imagery.
Yeah.
It was quite funny. I don't know if some people saw it. I think it got picked up by the Daily Post or something a year or so ago when they flew. Well, no, it'll be 2 years. COVID has just swallowed a year. When they flew over the area with the plane, and they go in a very sort of particular pattern, don't they? They kind of sort of
they do, yes. They have to go in a grid pattern effectively, or transects in lines, straight lines, backwards and forwards.
Yeah, so people who are kind of tracking flight patterns, there are all sorts of conspiracies going on. They're watching us in our gardens and counting sheep and all sorts.
Should I take my slides down now, Marion, so that everybody can see one another?
Go for it, yeah. So there's a couple of comments come through on the chat. So well, we've got a good suggestion actually from Tim Neal, who is asking if we've thought about setting the clearance periods up as DV gold residentials. So, sort of targeting DV groups specifically, which I think is a good idea, maybe worth exploring.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
So, Catherine Williams has asked, how has COVID impacted the project, either negatively or positively? So, delays or increase in visitor numbers impacting on the sites in question. Well, I mean, it's safe to say that COVID has definitely affected the project as a whole, hasn't it? There was so much stuff that we wanted to be getting going with, because with funded projects, it always takes a while for things to kind of come through and to get approval and all that sort of thing. And then just as we were starting, COVID hit, and luckily now we're in a situation where we're able to get going with stuff on the ground, which is really exciting, providing that it doesn't kick off again.
Yeah. It was a particular issue with this the gorse clearance or vegetation clearance, because we're limited to this. We have to avoid this bird nesting season in the summer, so we were just clear of where we could, get groups out, and then we were hit. We were into the bird nesting season, so it had to be delayed even longer, because we should have started that by now. But yeah, so it's unfortunate. I think Abby wanted to say something.
Oh no, I was just crossing my fingers.
Crossing your fingers.
Okay. Yeah. No, fingers crossed that we really want to get on with this now. We've been waiting for quite a long time. It had gone so well with our trials, and yeah. So.
I mean, it's an interesting question. If it's affected us positively. I'd like to think positively. It's given us time to plan for sure, hasn't it? So that we're really ready to just sort of get going and make sure that people sort of feel safe coming back to doing activities in groups and that sort of thing. But yeah, has there been an increase in visitor numbers? I mean, there's certainly there's certainly been an increase in visitors in areas of Snowdonia. We've seen the pictures of the queues for the Snowdon Summit, haven't we? But yeah, I don't know. Have you seen it, Abby? I mean, I guess you're based up in Ogwen a lot, aren't you? But have we seen an increase in the Carneddau specifically, and does it affect any of our sites?
I can only really speak for what I've seen myself, is when I'm walking in the Carneddau, so Moel Vaban, which Cathy showed, where the pilot study was done. It could be a mix of, because the gorse has become so extensive now on this particular mountain that everyone who decides to go up that mountain is restricted to the main footpaths. And obviously we have had heavier footfalls because of the lockdowns. And it's such an accessible mountain. I would highly recommend it. It's a
really accessible route, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because it looks like it's been such a busy mountain back in the day. There are so many small sort of experimental quarries, and you've got that characteristic incline right on the front, and stunning views to the top. I'm sure most of you have been up it already. But yeah, as I was saying, so well. Yes, lots of cairns on the top. But yeah, so COVID has had an effect, I think, on footfall, and hopefully with clearing pockets of gorse will allow people to maybe spread out on the mountain a little bit more, so those main footpaths don't get such intense usage. But yeah, that's footpath maintenance is another project.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the advantage of doing with this project. There are more people from what we can see, enjoying the outdoors, which is great. Not always responsibly, unfortunately. So I guess what we want to try and do is to sort of put out positive messaging and encourage people to enjoy the outdoors in a responsible way, and to understand why these places are so special and why it's really important to look after them, really. Anyway, we're going on a bit of a sidetrack here, aren't we? What else have we got? Craig Jones has asked a question. The methods of bracken clearance mentioned use of glyphosate. Yeah, I picked up on this as well. I'm interested to know why you would use glyphosate versus azulam, brackets Azulox.
I'll leave that one to you, Abby. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm actually not familiar with the second herbicide that you mentioned. We go purely on the recommendation from NRW, National Resources Wales. They only permit glyphosate to be used. I'm not actually sure on what the benefits are to nature using this particular herbicide. But what is crucial when using herbicide is the fact that it's spot spraying as well. So it is very particular, and it's only used on a very small area on the gorse itself, so we're not affecting any other vegetation. We have gone through lots of periods of trial and error on how to best combat the dominating gorse. It was once considered that spraying the adult sort of shrub itself was the best method, but we were just using way too much glyphosate, and you weren't getting that accuracy of getting the herbicide where you wanted it to go, and you wanted to spot spray right on where you've cut the root as well, because it's at its most vulnerable time and we're using a lot less. So it's always when you've initially cut, and then when you start to see that regrowth, that's when it's got its most energy into the top of the plant. Oh, great.
I've just seen Craig's thing flash up, and yeah, I'm aware as well that Azulux, it you know, periodically it gets banned, and there's only, you know, there are restrictions on using it. So I think you can use it at the moment, but yeah, so that's part of the problem with it, is that you're never quite sure whether you're allowed to use it or not.
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, because he says it doesn't affect most other vegetation. Interesting. I have a question. Why not burn it?
It'd be a lot quicker.
Yeah, and in the past that it has been done. It's this business of not affecting the soil chemistry, although admittedly, you know, a flash burn is not so bad for that. On the scheduled monuments, it's not allowed. You know, it's an event to burn on the scheduled sites, and it would be quite difficult to burn the larger areas without burning the archaeological sites as well. So that's part of the reason. But I don't know, Abby, is that what NRW's take on that is from the wildlife perspective?
Yeah, so like you've said, Cathy, it's pretty detrimental to the soil. You're changing its pH, you're introducing a lot more nutrients to the soil, which is naturally low in nutrient. So all we'd be doing in the long run really is helping the gorse grow even more.
Really? So it actually does it come back stronger in a way if you burn it?
It does. So one of the reasons why you've got higher biodiversity in low nutrient heathlands is because you don't have excuse me, a certain species that outcompete the less effective other species. So it's all about maintaining that biodiversity, introducing pockets and mosaics of different habitats, and not allowing the opportunity for a monoculture to come. So that's one of the main reasons why we don't burn. And like Cathy said, its effects on the archaeological monuments.
You said earlier as well, didn't you, Cathy? You know that really, yeah, it's a mosaic of sort of habitats that you want really across the landscape as a whole, isn't it? And
yeah, I mean,
as opposed to these sort of monocultures.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, once upon a time, you know, the farmers would have been cutting down the bracken and for bedding and gorse as well. I believe they did in the past, and it's just not, you know, sustainable for them to do that now. So that, you know, the practices have changed, and so you now get these vast areas of gorse and bracken.
Is that what it is then? Is that so? Because you know, why do you know why we have these kind of the big areas where it's just sort of completely taken over? Is it because there isn't that kind of constant sort of chipping away at it sort of thing?
It's a mixture. I don't know whether, you know, climate change as well makes it, you know, it makes it more robust, as it were, and yes, definitely they would have tackled it in the past as well. Put it down. So yeah, which they don't do now.
Interesting. Abby, do you know if as well does burning? You're saying it changes the pH of the soil. Does that affect, you know, bugs that are living in the soil that the chough are hunting for?
Yeah, that's another possibility. I was just reading Craig Jones's response as well. That's another very good reason for not burning, is because it doesn't really have much of a beneficial impact. But
on the rhizomes.
Yeah.
Right. So it doesn't kind of, and they're the thing, they can just sort of keep growing, can't they?
Yeah, but no, back to your question. So changing the pH, well, changing any physical property of the soil will inevitably change what grows there. And like you say, invertebrates, they don't just exist as they are. They have food that they need to rely on as well. And if their ecosystem changes and what can grow there, it'll inevitably change where they can survive. So you will see that domino and effective. You're effectively changing an ecosystem you're changing the fundamental level from which everything else comes from. So if you're changing those physical properties, you're changing what plants can grow there, what fungi can survive, and all those mycorrhiza symbioses. It will inevitably change what species you're going to find there.
I guess I'm trying to remember back to my biology days, but I remember, learning about kind of, you do get some parts of the world that experience, fires on quite a regular basis, don't you? And I guess they kind of give rise to certain, communities of plants and things like that can survive there. So, but I'm guessing they're the toughest and the most competitive ones that are able to kind of grow back with a vengeance, after they've been wiped out by, kind of natural wildfires, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of just like pressing the reset button, but every time you press that button, you're going slightly more acidic and you're changing those physical properties a little bit further into one direction. And so once you press that reset button, if you burn everything, it then takes years and years going through a cyclical process of you've got one dominating species that gets cut back for whatever reason, and you're slowly reaching that equilibrium. We're not quite at that equilibrium there on Moel Vaban or any mountain on the Carneddau yet, is because the management, like Cathy was saying, has decreased. So heathland is a semi-natural habitat, so it needs some kind of management to maintain it in good condition. So yeah, we just need to think about the better management for the future. And at the moment, we've got cutting of small pockets and just maintaining that mosaic for the future. And one of the main reasons to combat climate change as well.
Great, interesting. Got any other questions coming through? I've got another question. Can anybody guess where Cathy is?
It's pretty hard to tell from that angle, to be honest. Yeah.
I know because I've been there, but I'm not sure that I would have known had I not been there. I'll give you a clue. It's not Moel Vaban.
Double points if you can spot the archaeological monuments in the gorse.
Moel Lace. Craig has guessed Moel Lace. I don't know where that is. Where's Moel Lace? Is that it?
No.
Where's Moel Lace? Let's get my Carneddau and my Carneddau map out.
Yeah.
It's above Pen, my Mawrth and Gylchi, apparently. Don't know that corner that well, actually. Need to get out more.
I'll give you credit. You're in the right. It is in the north. Narrowing it down.
There's some interesting history in that valley, isn't there, Cathy?
There is. There's lots of archaeology in that valley, and particularly some very fine prehistoric archaeology. Yeah. Do you think we should put them out of their misery?
I think we should get more clues.
Oh, there's another one.
Above Llanfair Axe Factory.
Getting warmer.
Give us some more clues, Cathy.
What
else is unique about that area?
I'm trying to think what a good clue is.
Is there like an old so in the fields that are below, is there like an old is it an old monastery or something?
There is a supposedly medieval site that was on one of the earlier slides, actually. it's a, well, I suppose that it would give it away. It's above ABBA, basically. Anybody get it?
I think we should put them out of their misery.
Yeah, okay. Do you know what it is, Marion?
I can't actually remember what it's called. It's in Cwm Afon.
That's the one.
I can't remember the name of the mountain.
It's actually a really nice walk. So you've got a string of summits from Drim all the way over to Voyal, which is that mountain.
Voyal, that's it. Can you tell us what? Oh, hold on, my dog's scratching to get out of the room. 2 minutes. Does Voyal have a meaning?
Oh, I don't know what the meaning of the name is.
Not sure about that. I met with Yean Wynn today, who, I don't know if anybody knows him, but he's very knowledgeable about place names and meanings of them. We've at the moment, there's a couple of people on the project who are in the process of kind of gathering all these names and the kind of the meanings behind them. And it's really fascinating learning about some of them. So we'll have to look out for Voyal
Well,
hello.
Yeah, there's
I have a question.
Oh, hello. Sorry. Yeah, please
Hi,
speak up, because we're just chit-chatting and we'll just carry on.
I had a question about the vegetarian. I nearly did it as well. The vegetation clearance. So the first line of defence is that to sort of manually do it with people power, and then the hope is just spotting with the glyphosate. But will that be it then, or will there need to be ongoing periods of work even beyond the lifetime of the Carneddau project? What's the sort of long-term goal, I guess I'm wondering, in exposing the monuments and creating more habitat for the wildlife? But what will be the long-term plan to sustain that?
Really good question, Envis. Thank you. Yeah, so yeah, this is just the start, really. You know, we've got a 5-year project to sort of get all these sort of systems in place. But yeah, we will have to go back out and, you know, follow up this monitoring work that we did at the start to you know, note improvements. And yeah, we'll have to, and also those priority areas are really quite a small pockets within the whole of the you know, the area. So the aim would be that the legacy of the project, in the way, is that we carry that management forward beyond the, you know, it becomes the norm that we go out every year and do a certain amount of vegetation clearance. And hopefully, if we've got lots of volunteers who would be willing to help, then we you know, we'd be able to have ongoing programs. But yeah, but it's really important as well that we get the spot spraying in you know, the system in place properly, so that we, you know, it's done before it, at the right time. You know, you have to do it when it has just started sprouting, but when it's not too big, as it were.
Yeah.
So yeah, so and yeah, and just monitoring how it's all working, and, you know, taking action to change what we're doing a bit, or go back and do some more as time goes on. Does that answer the question?
That does. That's great. I also had another question about, and I don't know if it's the right question for this discussion, but it's around the LiDAR citizen science project. And I was wondering, are there elements of that project, or that strand of the project, that are going to look at climate change and the effects of climate change potentially on some of the monuments?
That's also
or to plan for the care of
Yeah.
them in the future?
That is a good question, because it has been suggested that you could use LiDAR data, you know, as a point in time, and that with this very high resolution LiDAR data, where you're getting a lot of detail, that potentially you can then refly it in you know, a number of years' time, and note the differences. Although that, you know, there does have to be a certain amount of legwork and going out on the ground. But yeah, I think using that data is going to be tied into all these sort of monitoring of climate change effects. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Just the LiDAR data itself is amazing, and so much potential uses for that information. It's so exciting.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Be happy to talk to you about it separately at some point if you'd like.
Yes, definitely. I'd love to.
Great. I think one last comment. I think I think we'll wrap up after this question or comment through from Craig. Oh, I've heard that a new bridge is being planned to cross the Avon on Avon. Is this correct, and will this new route have any impact? Do you want to talk about that, Abby?
Yeah, so it is true. There will be a small footbridge going over the Avon River. It will be right next to where the pipe, the hydro pipe, crosses the river as well.
It actually links with the route that we could, that you're on when you're seeing that view that's behind Cathy.
Yeah.
So the idea is to kind of create a new route from the top of Marian Forest, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's creating a smaller circular path for people to use. So once in Common Avon, some of you probably have already been there, but once you've chosen one side of the river, you're committed then to staying on that side until you go all the way up to the lake and then all the way back down, and then you're kind of stuck to cross it again. So as part of the first strand of the project, which is the Cylchdaith, the circular route of the Carneddau, it was just seen as an opportunity. It's such an interesting valley, like Cathy said, for archaeological reasons and also for wildlife. We thought that there was a need for the bridge. So it will be a small footbridge for people to cross. It's roughly halfway up the valley, because it's quite a long valley. It'll take you about an hour or so to get all the way to the top. So if you want to do a smaller route to explore the area, then we do have a small footbridge right next to the hydro pipe.
Great. And just quickly, the sort of the second part of the question, will that have any impact on, I don't know, on the landscape, on the archaeology, or?
I mean, it will have a visual impact, as in once you'll be able to see it from quite close. It's actually fairly hidden, because if you've been to the river, it sort of drops off steeply. So unless you're at the top edge of the river, you won't be able to see the bridge until you're looking for it, until you go right to the river. So it's chosen in a very secluded spot. Similarly, that's probably why the hydro pipe was chosen to cross that river as well. You'll see the hydro pipe before you see the bridge, that's for sure.
And I could just add in that because of the hydro scheme, the archaeology and the wildlife was assessed all along that area, in quite some detail, so we know what's there and what mitigation measures we would need to put in place to protect anything. But I don't think there'll be any issues at that particular location. Mm-hmm. But that will be checked out, certainly.
Yeah, it'll need to go through planning and that sort of thing, won't it? Great. I might have seen somebody looking like they were typing a question. I think we're going to have to wrap up. I hope everybody's enjoyed it. Wyn Jones, difyr iawn, very interesting, thank you. Diolch. So if you want to know any more about the project in general, or getting involved in tackling some gorse, then get in touch. So hopefully you can see on your screen the pink slide with our details on how to get in touch. But hopefully you'll be in touch with us anyway in all the usual channels or newsletter if you would have heard about this Caffi. Do keep in touch, and we hope to see you at a future event or on the ground chopping down some gorse, tucking into some jacket potatoes.
And
I know I will be.
marshmallows.
And marshmallows. Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining.